Taxpayers are funding the harmful destruction of children. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Terry Schilling is president of the American Principles Project, and his organization recently released a new report uncovering the rapid growth of the gender industry and the money behind it. Terry joins us to share how this industry has preyed on confused minors to turn a profit and what we can do to hold them accountable. I'm blessed to again be joined by my friend and co-host, Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, the stories just don't stop. And it's heart-wrenching to see how so-called medical professionals are taking advantage of vulnerable children and convincing them they were born in the wrong body.
Well, the American Principles Project just released a new report called the Gender Industrial Complex, and it is full of shocking information. We're reviewing this on a regular basis, but for most people, they don't have any idea of how widespread this is. Multi-billion-dollar a year business that is actually projected, or they want it to go up to over $200 billion a year, which is unbelievable, the amount of money that's at stake.
It's our privilege, it's our honor to bring you the truth around this issue. We cannot wait to bring it to you. Up first is Liberty Counsel's Freedom Alert.
Ohio needs to protect females in public spaces. Liberty Counsel sent a letter to the state officials in Ohio urging stronger protections for females in private spaces. Ohio has a law protecting women and girls from male indecency in private spaces in public schools. However, further action is needed to expand those protections to all public accommodations. Recently, an adult male employee of an Ohio YMCA invaded a shower reserved for female minors. Even though there were other males in the lifeguard course at the YMCA and male facilities were available, the male harassed the underage girls in the minors' girls' locker room. A teenage girl reported his actions to the YMCA staff, but she was told to use the handicap bathroom if she was uncomfortable. Seriously? Every state should protect women in all facilities.
Up next, Matt's interview with Terry Schilling.
I'm pleased to welcome a very special guest to Freedom Alive, Terry Schilling, who is the president of the American Principles Project. Welcome to Freedom Alive, Terry.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Terry, please update our viewers. What is Principles, the American Principles Project? What are you doing? And I want to get into specifically an amazing report that you just released.
Well, Matt, American Principles Project has a very basic concept. The American family is the most important unit of all the world, including our society in America, and we need to make sure that that is defended in both politics and public policy. I like to tell some of our supporters that we're the NRA for families, but we launched a whole political effort called Big Family, which is, so to say, in Washington, D.C., as you know, there is a special interest arm for every industry. There's big pharma, big oil, big tobacco, and we like to think of ourselves as Big Family. We are there to defend the American family, parental rights, the innocence of children, anything pertaining to the family. We're going to be there, and we are going to unelect the bums. If anyone's attacking our children or parental rights, we want to throw them out of office, and then we want to pass legislation that's going to protect our kids and our parental rights.
Well, and you have experience also in political campaigns, so you're focused right now on the issue of family, those that are going to promote family or those that are going to oppose family in terms of political campaigns, whether they should be elected or not elected.
That's exactly right. The best example of where we've made an incredible impact is on the transgender issue of men and girls sports, and also giving children sex change procedures, well, sex rejection procedures, that is a more accurate term. We have run millions of dollars in campaign ads attacking both Democrats and Republicans who are weak on these issues and hurting our children. And we've won great elections. The most important election we just won was in 2024, where the transgender issue was the #1 issue for swing voters. It really helps highlight how extreme a lot of these politicians have become over the years, and voters do not want more of it. They want to get back to normalcy, and they want to protect children from this stuff, especially our girls' sports, and from these horrible procedures that children are going through.
Which brings me to the topic we wanted to talk to you about, because you released an amazing, disturbing really for people to actually find out what's going on in this industry, study called the Gender Industrial Complex, or the study that you talked about and that you did research on. What's the name of the study? Tell us about how this began, and let's get into some specifics.
Yes. Years ago, even before the Transgender Industrial Complex, we released a report called the Transgender Leviathan. And what that said was, what it highlighted and exposed was the enormous industry behind the transgender movement. We were exposing it. The trans activists, they like to say that they're a civil rights movement. They say that this is, Joe Biden famously quipped that the transgender movement is the civil rights movement of our time. And we looked at this, and it was absolutely preposterous. So we covered in the Transgender Leviathan the media apparatus behind this, the academic apparatus behind this, the medical apparatus behind it. But the next few years, we decided to dig into the financials, and that became the report for the Transgender Industrial Complex. We wanted to find out how much money was involved, who was making the money, and why this stuff was being pushed. And what we found was, first and foremost, the transgender industry in America right now is over $4.5 billion annually. And that's actually a very small number. The goal for these trans activists in the trans industry is to grow to $200 billion. They have stated in their own public writings that Robbie Catherine Anthony, she is the CEO of Euphoria, which is it sounds crazy to say, but it's a transgender tech startup. And what they do is they provide these types of sterilization drugs and cross-sex hormones to children and even to adults, and they make money off of that. She's quoted in our trans industry report as saying that if we're able to transition all 1.3 million Americans who identify as trans, the industry will be worth over $200 billion annually. To put that in perspective, Matt, that's bigger than the entire U.S. film industry is. But this is there's a lot of money in this, and the important thing for people to understand, because I think a lot of people are confused about why they hear so much about this industry when it's such a small population, is because there's so much money behind it, and they want to grow. They want more people identifying as trans, and they want more people that identify as trans to become sterilized and mutilated. This is how they make money. These procedures, by the way, one thing that we uncovered was that for a full sex rejection procedure for men to trying to become women, it costs around $400,000 to $450,000 for the initial rounds of surgeries. But for a woman who's trying to transition, it's around $600,000 to $650,000. Much of this, Matt, we found is taxpayer funded through Medicaid and other types of programs. The military had covered these procedures. A lot of people don't realize this, or they learned about it in the 2024 election, that we are paying for prisoners to get gender transitions. We're also paying for illegal immigrants. They're weaponizing our tax dollars against us. And even I would argue, Matt, they're weaponizing our tax dollars against these poor victims of the transgender industry. These procedures, as we saw in the CAS report and even the latest HHS report that the Trump administration released, that these procedures actually pose no benefit to those that go through them and suffer through them. So we've got to end this industry, especially as it pertains to children, because it's wreaking havoc and causing devastation all across the country. What we've also found is that a lot of this is happening through children's hospitals. Boston Children's Hospital, the Langone Hospital in New York, these have been some of the worst players in the field that have been harming children. The Vanderbilt hospital system in Tennessee, they have been exposed for talking about how profitable these procedures are. And they go into great depths about, you can make $20,000 off a mastectomy. You can make $10,000 off the anesthesia care. These numbers are big, and they keep adding up. And they also say that these are low numbers, low estimates. I should share with you, Matt, that we hired a company called Grandview Research to do this research on the financials for the transgender industry for us. And Grandview Research is not a conservative organization. In fact, they're not a political organization. They are a financial forecasting firm that hedge funds and private equity use to make determinations about emerging industries and whether or not those industries would be good to invest in to get a good return on your money. And so the report that we initially got from Grandview was very positive and optimistic about how fast the industry was growing, how many more people were beginning to identify as trans, and they were just as optimistic as many of the trans activists and members of the trans industry that we deal with on a regular basis.
Unbelievable. And now we have a development that happened in Texas with the Texas Children's Hospital. That seems like a good trend, but that's an isolated incident with regards to Texas, and thankfully the Texas Attorney General came after them. Talk about that, and hopefully that becomes a trend, but unlikely in certain states.
Yes, sir. So the Children's Hospital, after being exposed, they had to pay a $10 million settlement to the victims. We need a lot more of this, Matt. One of the big victories that we had just at the end of 2025, the fiscal year, was that the Trump administration, through Health and Human Services, declared that Medicaid services and Medicaid finances cannot be used to pay for these procedures. And any hospital or clinic that is performing these procedures is now ineligible from receiving Medicaid dollars. This was a huge victory, and it's why we've seen so many of these clinics and hospitals shut down their gender transition programs, because the Medicaid dollars are so important to the survival of these hospitals. So we have an ally right now in the Trump administration for our children and to protect them, but that will go away the minute a Democrat is taking back the Oval Office.
Now, a lot of times we think of Planned Parenthood as an abortion provider, and certainly they are, but it looks like they've jumped into this industry as well.
Yes, we covered this as well. We released a report called Funding Insanity just last year, and we highlighted the fact that not only was Planned Parenthood sticking with all of the other terrible services that they commit against the rest of us, but they were expanding their business model into providing Lupron, which is a chemical castration drug that has been deemed too cruel to administer to sex offenders. But they are administering these to children, and many times after only a 30-minute consultation. Man, I think it's important for your viewers and listeners to understand that the affirmation first model is at the center of the entire transgender industry. And what this model says is that it's essentially immoral and unethical to ask any questions, to probe any deep, any amount into whether or not these children are actually suffering from gender dysphoria. They literally are required to give and affirm these children in their new confused gender identities.
Terry, that right there, I think, is the heartbreak of this situation, because you have these minors coming in, the parents are bringing in, say, their son or daughter, that have real issues, mental health issues, and they have depression, anxiety, ADHD, some kind of body image disorder or confusion. They come in, they want real help. They're desperately seeking the kind of help that they need. And instead of getting the mental help that is necessary, that they need, they're rushed into puberty blockers, opposite sex hormones, and then these mutilating surgeries that maims them for life. And then the underlying mental health issue for which they came in never gets treated. It gets worse. And then when they realize what they've done to their body, their mental health is even worse because it continued to progress. And now they realize they've mutilated their body.
Well, Matt, I think this is an important moment to share with you and preview that American Principles Project will be releasing the first ever report that we're aware of that covers the violence of the transgender industry, the violence caused by this affirmation first and affirmation only model. As we all know from the CAS review and from the HHS report that was released at the beginning of the new Trump administration, these procedures do nothing to help children feel more comfortable in their own body. In fact, it exacerbates it. there's something different about these shootings committed by trans-identifying people. When Columbine happened and the mass shootings that followed that, there was a plethora of reports and research done to highlight and get to the causes of these mass shootings and why they were happening. And when it comes to the trans shooters, there is absolutely zero interest. There's a whitewashing by our media, by our academic institutions, and by our research institutions. And so American Principles Project is going to be releasing a report highlighting the causes, the overrepresentation, the whitewashing, and honestly, directly, the government collusion and support for these types of procedures and violence that they're participating in. So that'll be a groundbreaking report. I guarantee you it'll get a lot of eyeballs, but it's going to be based on solid facts. One thing I want to make clear, though, Matt, is at the heart of American Principles Project and everything that we're doing, we love everyone. We want the best for every single person, regardless of how they identify, regardless of whatever confusion they have. And we believe that at the heart of this transgender industry, they are administering the exact wrong prescriptions to these people. These people need true affirmation. There's nothing wrong with your body. It's healthy. It's functioning perfectly as God intended it. And there's nothing wrong with being born a male. There's nothing wrong with being born a female. We're all children of God, and He loves us very much. But we can't keep giving these children chemical castration drugs. We can't keep giving them the surgeries. You know, Matt, one thing I should point out is that there was a recent report that came out that showed that between 2015 and 2020, there were over 48,000 transgender procedures performed on children in America. And that was slowed down only because of COVID. And now it's being slowed down because President Trump has taken action to protect our children. But we have to stop these procedures. We have to stop the taxpayer funding of it. And we have to protect our kids.
I'm glad you're producing that report. We've been writing about these various mass murders or these attempted murders or murders like in the Charlie Kirk situation of the trans. And you seem to see all these murders that are taking place, these assassinations, these mass murders. They have one thing in common lately, and this has been over the last several years, and that is they're being done by people who identify as trans that are taking these drugs or may have gone through the mutilating surgeries.
Yes. One big difference to point out between these latest shootings by trans-identifying people and the ones committed in the late 90s and even early 2000s is that those school shootings typically had intended targets. The kids that did them wrote in their manifestos that they were going after bullies, people that had caused them harm. In Nashville and in Minneapolis, these were shootings conducted by people that had had no contact with the people that they were targeting. This is something very different, and it's very odd. But I also just have to say that this is not just because these people are not being affirmed. In Tumbler Ridge, the Canadian shooting that we just saw, Tumbler Ridge is a town of 2,300 people. There were 191 children at this school where the latest shooting was, and the shooter killed 6 of the children and injured 27. That's 3% of the school's population. When I found that out, Matt, I just have to say, I'm from a town of 6,000 people, and it's a very small town. Everyone knows everyone.
Everyone knows.
So I can't imagine what it was like for this poor town. But I just have to point out that this one in Tumbler Ridge, the child was affirmed by his mother and was affirmed by his half-brother, but he killed those 2 people and then went to the school to kill the rest. But I will also point out that there's been some serious whitewashing in the media. The CBC, by the way, did more profiles on the impact that this shooting had on the transgender community rather than the profiles of the victims who were killed and maimed and injured. There's something very sick going on here, man, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I'm glad that you're leading in the way in that, and your report has been very, very eye-opening for so many people. We researched this as well, but for people who've never seen this, your report is phenomenal. So I encourage people to contact the American Principles Project and get this report as well as other reports that you're doing, especially the new one that's coming up. Now, one of the things that you list in the Gender Industrial Complex report that the American Principles Project did, you list a cost list of the most common procedures. These are absolutely grotesque. Take us through a little bit of what these procedures are and what they involved, or, what's the most common kind of procedure that you see?
Well, just in case there's any children in the room, this would be a good time for parents to either hit the pause button or, get the kids out of the room. Look, there are all types of procedures. The most common one right now that we see is the administration of puberty blocking drugs, which is a euphemism for chemical castration drugs. The most common drug there is a drug called Lupron. It's produced by a company called AbbVie, and they make millions and millions of dollars administering these drugs every single year to children. I think that's very important to point out. The transgender industry says all the time, we aren't doing this to children. What are puberty blockers for then, if not for children? That's kind of the definition of a child, is someone that hasn't gone through puberty yet. But the other more common things that we're seeing are double mastectomies, gender-affirming double mastectomies. And to be clear, these are sex rejection procedures. Yeah. And I would encourage everyone to start using those terms for it. The other procedures that they have are vaginoplasty. I mean, I could go on and on, Matt, but
there's a lot of them. You have a long list of them. And basically, they're taking your God-given created organs and they're just literally mutilating them and trying to pretend that they can create you as to something different. And essentially what they're saying is God made a mistake. He put you in the wrong body. We'll fix everything, fix all your mental issues by removing your breast, your healthy breast. Any doctor who would do that, particularly on a minor, is unbelievable in their depravity and their greed for money. They ought to lose their license. Frankly, I think they ought to be put in jail for doing something like that on a minor.
At a minimum, Matt, I don't think these doctors should be allowed within 500 feet of a school. That's how evil they are. That's how twisted they are. The idea that you would sterilize a child, mutilate them, and prevent them from being able to have babies themselves someday, or even be able to nurse their future babies is absolutely criminal. One thing I will point out is that after the administration of chemical castration drugs like Lupron, children lose their sexual function forever. Many of these young men who go on these drugs end up becoming asexual, meaning they have no attraction to the opposite sex or even the same sex. They lose the ability to build bonds with a future spouse. And I think that's what's most sad about this. It's one of the most evil industries of all time. And I think the only proper word for it is demonic.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is demonic. It is very dark, and it is very destructive to these kids and to families, to adults as well. And now, just recently, there have been multiple lawsuits. There are multiple lawsuits pending. Right now, there are a number of lawsuits that have been settled or have gone to jury verdicts where the minor, now an adult, has filed suit against the counselors for doing exactly what you said, just a 30-minute, maybe even telehealth type or telemed type of visit, and then rushing them into these puberty blockers, hormones, and then surgeries. And there's also lawsuits against doctors who performed it and clinics. There needs to be more of that because these kids and families and people are being permanently harmed by this mutilating procedure.
I couldn't agree with you more, Matt. And one thing that I think more people should be aware of is what I would call blue shield laws. These are laws that were passed in California, Illinois, and New York. And what it essentially allows them to do is to mail puberty-blocking drugs, abortion drugs, through the U.S. Postal Service through a telemedicine appointment. So that means that if you're in a safe state where you have legislators and a governor that has protected your family and your children from these types of drugs, you're still in danger. Because your 12-year-old, 11-year-old, 13-year-old son or daughter could easily get a telemedicine appointment, and they have people that actually search out and recruit these kids on these online forums, and they can go to a telemedicine appointment, set up an appointment with a doctor, never meet them in person, never do actual counseling, and get these drugs mailed to them confidentially. It's absolutely criminal, and we absolutely need to put an end to it.
I know states like Minnesota also have these sanctuary cities or sanctuary states, if you will, for this issue. So if you have a runaway that runs away and then the parent wants to try to find them or help them because they're getting ready to be indoctrinated and get these drugs, say, and they go to Minnesota, Minnesota's not going to help, not going to reciprocate against anybody there that is in the trans-identifying world and will reject subpoenas or court orders from other states.
Matt, this is state-sanctioned kidnapping. at the most basic level. These blue states have absolutely lost their minds. This is part of a coordinated effort to absolutely destroy not just the American family, but the Christian family. Right? A lot of secular people don't know any better, and so when they meet with these doctors or school counselors and hear that they have to save their child's life by giving them these drugs and affirming their new gender identity, they don't know any different. But Christians know the difference. These laws that allow for states to kidnap children and take custody away from their parents are absolutely designed and targeted towards Christian families.
Terry, in the final minute that we have on the program, what advice, what counsel, what action point would you leave with our viewers?
The number one most important thing, because I know a lot of parents listen to your show and watch you, the number one most important thing is to talk to your children about these issues. Tell them about the beauty of God's design for male and female. Tell them about the beauty of family and the importance of giving your life to God, giving your vocation of marriage and the size of your family to God, and let Him plan your life, plan your family size, plan everything for you. God didn't make any mistakes when He made you. He loves you with all His heart. He died for you, and He wants you to be with Him in heaven forever. And anyone else that tells you that you were born the wrong way or that God made a mistake when He made you and put you in the wrong body, they are lying to you and should not be trusted.
Well, your website is American Principles Project, and Terry is the president of American Principles Project, and also this amazing report that I encourage everybody to go to and get, the Gender Industrial Complex, and also looking forward to your upcoming reports. Terry, thank you for joining us and for all your work that you're doing on this critically important topic.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Matt, there are moments in stories like this where the fight is really evident. Like this is spiritual warfare, what's happening here, and we really are called to fight.
Look, if you're silent on this issue, what you're doing is you're killing kids, you're destroying kids, because what's the target of this? Kids, children that are made in the image of God, where they have different kinds of struggles, maybe have depression, anxiety, they might have ADHD, they might be on some level of the autism spectrum, might have body image disorder, maybe eating disorders. They have different kinds of issues as they're growing up, and they're wanting help. And when they go to a counselor, they're told, well, you know what the problem is? You were born in the wrong body. God made a mistake. We're going to fix that. We'll give you puberty blockers, which is very devastating to these kids. And then we'll give you opposite sex hormones. You're going to have to take those for the rest of your lives. They don't tell them that. And then we'll operate and we'll remove some of your healthy body parts, and you'll be fine after that. Well, they trust these people because they want help. They go through this process. They mutilate their bodies. They damage their reproductive organs. They hurt the production of and the development of their bodies. And then their mental issues still continue and get worse because they've never been treated. And then they realize they made a mistake, and sometimes they're oftentimes worse.
Amen. In closing, remember 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 to 20, which says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. Join us here next time. You'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.